Thanks for inviting us in on this Thursday evening. Tonight, IPS approved plans to give leftover referendum money to some select charter schools in the district. Now, there's a lot to unpack here tonight. So for our big story, we want to dig into how much money these schools will get and concerns about whether the district's decision is actually legal. Lauren Costa kicks off our big story tonight with how these shared funds work and the stipulations IPS put into place.
The school board at IPS gave the green light to start sharing district funds with charter schools. The money comes from a referendum that was voted on in 2018, but the catch is it didn't specify who can and cannot get the money. Some parents say it's only fair that all IPS students get those funds.
And yes, equity extends to funding and how we ensure we have done all we can.
At the meeting, several parents voiced their support to share 2018 operating referendum dollars with all IPS schools.
Sharing of these funds is about what is fair, what is right, and what is equitable.
Sasha Fletcher is part of a group of parents who launched a series of recommendations in March to make schools more just and equitable, saying that includes school funding.
As someone who cares deeply about equity in our entire family of schools, I am not just in this for my child, but for all IPS children.
And commissioners had mixed opinions, ultimately deciding to give $5 million annually to 25 of its charter schools. But there are a few requirements. At least 3% of the funding needs to be used for teacher compensation. The remainder can go to support students. Schools will also be required to share spending data of the funds and verify use of state charter school grant funding. Going forward, IPS plans to analyze its finances for the whole district to make sure every student has access to quality education.
This is an investment in IPS students and once again a demonstration of IPS's commitment to listening, collaborating, and partnering.
And charter schools will be receiving the funding twice a year. The referendum ends in 2026.
There's been some pushback to sharing some of that money from referendums with charter schools. State lawmaker Ed Delaney told me tonight it's actually a legal issue.
They're not obeying the law. They've gone around that. They didn't have such a referendum proposal. They didn't tell the public they were going to give it to the charter schools. They've had this money available for 3 years. They haven't given them any money. And the reason is because they can't under the law.
So we wanted to know, could IPS end up in a legal battle because of this decision? According to Delaney, it's a very real possibility.
Some taxpayer could file a lawsuit saying you're spending money in unauthorized fashion. It's really pretty simple. It sounds to me like there'd be a pretty good basis for it.
Delaney told me this move by IPS could also end up hurting the chances of future school funding referendum down the line.
These referenda don't always pass, and they're not going to pass to help our school students, our 93% of students who are not in charters or vouchers. We're not going to help the 93% if the 7% get too greedy. That's not going to happen.
Budget concerns aren't a new issue for IPS, especially with the renewed focus on equity in classrooms.
Somehow, children can have fundamentally different resources in their schools because they live 30 minutes apart. And the most astounding part of that is we accept it as normal.
Right now, almost 75% of kids in the district identify as students of color, but only 41% of those students are enrolled in the college prep programs. And the district says part of the problem is not enough money to go around.
Because much larger increases have gone to districts with significantly less poverty. A truly regressive pattern that confuses equality with equity.
During the State of the District back in September, school leaders outlined several goals to improve equity in classrooms. We have a link to that, along with tonight's vote on referendum sharing with charter schools. Just open the WTHR app.